everyone.
God bless you.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Fine. Spiritually blessed.
Welcome to the presentation on Daniel chapter 11, Greece and the time of the end. I'm happy to share this with all of you here today. I'm going to have a word of silent prayer and then I'll close to pray. Dear Father in heaven, we pray that every angel in heaven needed will be here to help us to understand the truth. Guide us, bless us, and keep us in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So we're beginning in Daniel chapter 11. You can turn there with me. As you turn there, I'll just tell you what we'll be doing over the next 3 to 4 presentations. In a very simple way, we are going to be focusing on the kingdom of Greece, the same kingdom described in Daniel chapter 2, which is a kingdom of brass, which is given more detail in the book of Daniel chapter 11. And all we're going to do is walk step by step through these verses and see if there are any implications for us at the end. This will be based upon one understanding that what God told us before were types and shadows for what would come in the future. You can see this in 1 Corinthians 10. I'll just write that down. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 11. And it says, now all these things, that's all, happen unto them for ensamples. And they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Very simple. This thought is re-echoed in Romans chapter 15, verse 4. And the other simple principle, which is like the key to understand the significance of the kingdom of Greece in our time, is found in the book of Ecclesiastes. For some reason, there seems to be sometimes a stumbling block for people, this principle, but it's so clear to me in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. So I'll read it and you can tell me what it means, because perhaps you can identify the clearer meaning. So somebody want to volunteer to read Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. Okay, you're not there yet, not quick enough. The thing that hath been is that which shall be. Really simply, the thing which hath been, what's that? Past, gone, is that which shall be. What is that? Past, present, or future? Future. It's saying the thing that has gone past is that which will be also future. So all we're doing is we're looking into the past. That's Grecian kingdom, that's gone, it's finished. But we're seeing if there's any lessons from this past history in the future. Now, shall we give a second verse? Because maybe some didn't catch that verse. So let's go to another verse. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Put them both down. Verse 15. This one's even more simple.
That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been.
That which hath been, what is that? Past is now. What is that?
Present.
And that which hath been, or that which is to be, had already been. That which is future has already happened in the past. So there's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon summarizes it in Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9. So this is a very simple principle that history repeats. So we're looking at the history step by step to see, to examine, to investigate whether this principle that history repeats is so, and what we can glean from it also. So let's turn to Daniel chapter 11 quickly. We don't have much time. Daniel chapter 11, and the focus of the verses will be between verse 3 of Daniel 11 and verse 20. But we're going to start reading for you in verse 1. I know it sounds simple, but we're actually going to read the verses. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Daniel chapter 11 verse 1. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him.
Verse 2. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia.
Verse 3. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and shall do according to his will.
Verse 4. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others beside those.
Verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion.
Verse 6. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times.
Verse 7. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the kingdom north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail.
Verse 8. And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north.
Verse 9. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land.
Verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and shall overflow and pass through. Then shall he return, and be stirred up even to his fortress.
Verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And she shall set forth a multitude, a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand.
Verse 12. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it.
Verse 13. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches.
Verse 14. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, that they shall fall. Verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand.
Verse 16. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his will, and none shall stand before him. and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Verse 17, he shall also with the strength, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither before him.
Verse 18. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince, for his own behalf, shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him.
Verse 19, then shall he set his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found.
Verse 20, then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to verse 1 and 2, and we'll just see where we are in history. So verse 1, Daniel 11, says, also I, the first year of Darius the Mede. Verse 2 says, behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. So you have Medes and Persians. So verse 1 and 2, you're in the kingdom of the Medes and Persians. And what kingdom came after Medes and Persians? Greece. So in the next verse, verse 3, it says, a mighty king shall stand up. How do you know this is now talking about Greece? Well, in verse 4, it says, when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and divided to 8, where it speaks about something being divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. Anyone know that verse? Daniel 8, verse 8, talks about the Grecian kingdom, and it talks about the Grecian kingdom as a rough goat, he-goat, and when his notable horn, is broken, then it's divided, his kingdom, towards the 4 winds of heaven. So this he-goat's notable horn is the same as this mighty king in Daniel chapter 11. So you can look at that in your own time. But verse 21 and 22 of Daniel 8 say this is Greece, it says it clearly, and then it says the notable horn is the first king. So when we come to Daniel 11, and we're looking at this mighty king who stands up, we're looking at the first king of Greece. When he's broken, he's divided towards 4 winds of heaven. Who was the first king? What was his name? What's it on the board?
Alexander.
But Alexander the Great was the first king. And he died very young, at the age of 33, in the year 323. And when he died, a civil war broke out, because there was no one to rule. The Bible says in verse 4 that they wouldn't go to his posterity, that means children. And usually a kingdom will go to the king's children. Now Alexander did have children, but the child was still in the womb when Alexander died, so he obviously couldn't reign. And all the generals started fighting among themselves, who's going to reign, who's going to control which area. There was one guy called Ptolemy, and he took the south upon Alexander the Great's death in the year 323. But the rest were still warring for many, many years, so they had a very long civil war. There was internal strife and commotion. Until the year 301, when it was finally divided officially into 4 areas. Now the scripture calls them the 4 winds of heaven. What does that mean? 4 winds of heaven.
4 directions.
The 4 directions. So north, east, south, and west. Does anyone know how Alexander the Great died?
Drinking.
You don't know.
Drinking.
Was poisoned or what?
So some people say he was poisoned, or maybe he was drunken. They're trying to evade the fact that he was drunken, basically.
Yeah, he was poisoned through drug.
Or he was poisoned through his intoxication. Yeah. So the Spirit of Prophecy has this to comment. It's found in Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, page 29, paragraph 1. It says, Alexander found it easier to subdue kingdoms than to rule his own spirit. Then it goes on to say, after conquering nations, he fell through indulgence of appetite. that is how he died. Is eating and drinking a matter of life and death?
Yes.
Yes. On that note, we're going to give you a healthy vegetarian acronym to remember the 4 generals who took the 4 areas after Alexander the Great died. So the first, I'll just draw it here. North, east, and west. So the first one was L for lentil. S for stew, P for parsley, and C for couscous. Lentil, stew, parsley, couscous. Lysimachus, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassandra. Can you remember that? Sometimes it's hard to remember these names in history. So hopefully that will help you remember.
Parsley with couscous.
Yes, it does. So I hope that will help you to remember lentil, stew, parsley, couscous. And I hope it will also help you to remember why Alexander the Great died and the fact that what we eat is very important. It is a matter of life and death.
So verse 5 now, it introduces for the first time in the book of Daniel, a king of the south. That phrase, this is the first time it's mentioned. Who else is mentioned in that verse? I say who, another party. Is there another party in that verse? Someone give me a key word. I want you to study now, so your eyes has to be riveted in that verse to pick out gems.
One of his princes.
Princes. So there's a king of the south. I'm just going to put KS. And there's a prince. Even if you don't understand anything else, you know that there's 2. Is there any more? For the vote that in that verse? No, there's not. Just 2. Would everyone agree?
Yeah.
So we went in verse 4 from 4 when it was divided into 4, and now in verse 5 there's only 2. So we've gone from 4 to 2 in one verse. There's a transition. So the question is, we want to work out King of the South. At least the title is there, some level of understanding. But one of his princes, who is this prince? Now before you dissect them 2, what's the verse trying to say? What's the main essence of this verse on a very simple childlike reading? King of the South will be strong. His prince will be strong above who?
Him.
Who's the him?
King of the South.
So what's it trying to show or say?
That there's somebody.
The prince is going to, you said overtake, it's a good word, it's going to be stronger than the king of the
South.
south. So, Zadok, can you come here for me? Come. Right, if you come.
Should I bring these?
No, just come as you are. Christ says. He doesn't leave us as we are. So here's the king of the south, and he's strong. Just hold that piece of paper for me. But we have a second party, which is one of his princes, which, as you said, takes over. And the king of the prince, hold this for me, becomes strong above, quite literally, the chair just about worked, comes strong above the king of the south. So the king of the south is a strong power, but the prince becomes strong above the king of the south. That's really important to know when we come to see this history later on. Does everyone follow that? But in verse 6, there's still just 2 parties, but a different phrase. The king of the south's daughter, so that we've got a king of the south. Who's the second party?
His daughter.
But the king's daughter of the south shall come to the
King of the North.
So now it says king of the north. So we only had 2 parties, king of the south and prince, and verse 6, king of the south and king of the north. So obviously king of the south must be king of the south. Cross that out. Prince must be king of the north. So interestingly, by verse 6, the title of the prince changes from prince to, hold this one
King
for
of the
me.
North.
Yeah. changes to king of the north. So if you didn't pick up on that, you're going to miss a massive point, and that's this. The king of the north was first the prince, but then he ascends to become king of the north. How? How did he come from down there to up here? How? Remember there was 4, and we'll just go over to this map to see the 4 areas. The king of the south is Ptolemy. He has here Egypt and Libya down here. Remember, it was in reference to Jerusalem, so it's south of Jerusalem. And then to the east side we had Seleucus, and to the north we had Lysimachus, and to the west we had Cassander. And we went from 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We go to 2. Does anyone know the names of the 2 remaining? Seleucus. So Seleucus must be the who? The prince or the king of the north. So what happened in the change or the transition from Seleucus being one of the 4 to Seleucus being one of the 2? What happened?
They die.
So what happened is that Seleucus, after taking his own territory, that's his first place he was given, the east, he then went across in 286, a few years later, and took out Cassander, the west, and claimed it as his own. So this and this was his second territory. This is his first. A few years later, he takes out the west. Cassander is no more. But by 281, just a few years later, guess who he takes out? Lysimachus in the north. That's his third territory that he's taken. And now what does he have? What does the prince now have? He has all of this. Thank you for that illustration. You can take a seat now. Thank you. You can keep that. He has all of this. He has all of this. He has 3 territories now, whereas the king of the south just has 1. So he shall be strong above him and have a great dominion. This great dominion covers all of this top area, which now becomes north of Jerusalem, and Ptolemy remains in the south. So how many areas did he take? 3. Why is that significant? Well, isn't it interesting, every time that a nation comes onto the prophetic scene, how many areas do you think they take out?
3.
You can go back into history. Babylon took 3 places, historically. Daniel chapter 7 verse 5, talking about Medo-Persia, the bear. How many ribs in its mouth?
3.
3, because it took 3 before it came to its prominent power. And then you go to Daniel chapter 8 verse 9, which deals with pagan Rome, and it says, he waxed great towards how many areas?
3.
South, east, pleasant land. Pagan Rome also took 3 before it came to dominion. Now you all know this. Adventists, the papacy, the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. How many horns were plucked up out of their roots before the reign of supremacy began?
3.
3. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Daniel chapter 7 verse 8. So they all take 3. So now what lesson should that tell us? After he's taken that third one, what begins?
His reign.
His reign. After the papacy had taken the third horn, what began?
His reign.
His reign. So I'm just going to rub this out here, and I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 dots representing the 3 territories. And I'm going to put King of the North, and before he was a prince. And it's interesting, it says one of his princes, doesn't it? And you usually think, okay, so you go to Uriah Smith and the general reading is one of Alexander the Great's princes. But when you read the verse, and the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, who would you link the his to, usually? whatever noun was mentioned before the his, which is king of the south, which is Ptolemy. So my question to you students of prophecy is, how was Seleucus one of Ptolemy's princes? Anyone know? This is really key.
Are they related?
Just before he reached this point, which he reached by 281, so I'm going to put a date there. This was the third territory he had taken. He started 301, got his own. 286 took Cassander. 281 he took Lysimachus. He'd taken his free supreme dominion. But the way he was a prince is, before he became king of the north, or he had his dominion, he actually went to the south and helped Ptolemy, or Ptolemy helped him because he was under attack. So he sought refuge in Egypt and acted as one of Ptolemy's princes, quite literally. And it's important that the king of the south helps the king of the north, because he stays there for a few years until he reaches his power, and only by Ptolemy's help does the king of the north, Seleucus, become this supreme ruler. When we come to see the application later, that's important that the king of the south helped who? King of the north, to put him on the throne. Let's keep going.
Okay, verse 5. Verse 6. In the end of years, they shall join themselves together. Who was joining themselves together in the end of years? What does it say in the verse?
The king of the south and the king of the north.
Yes. So it was the king of the south and the king of the north who made an agreement between themselves, because there was so much fighting. And the king of the south decided, I'm going to give my daughter to the king of the north to just seal this agreement. So you know, sometimes you shake hands to seal an agreement. Well, they did different things in past days. And political. So politically, there was this marriage to seal an agreement. And that happened in the year 252. So not long after the king of the north had his dominion, about 30 years, more or less, after. So I'm going to put it here, 252. There is an agreement. Now the daughter was called Berenice. I'm going to write it here. But in order to marry Berenice, the king of the north had to put away his existing wife. So he divorced his wife to marry this lady for political reasons, and the wife was very upset. And years later, in the year 246, when Berenice's father died, he was the king of the south who'd made this agreement. When Berenice's father died, the king of the north decided, I don't really want to offend my ex-wife anymore. So he went back to his former wife, and she was still upset, so she murdered him. Yeah, so there was already two people who died. Berenice's father died, and now the king of the north has died. So over here, on the right hand side of this board, you have lines to show when the different kings died. And you can see in the year 246, both sides die. So the king of the south dies, and the king of the north dies. Not only does this lady murder the king of the north because she was upset at what he did, but she's now threatening to murder Berenice. So Berenice is a bit worried, but finally she dies. She's murdered by the same woman. So everybody dies in the year 246. I'm going to write given up, because that's what you see in the verses. It says, she shall be given up. And the scripture often uses that term. You can do a word search on given up. Often uses that term to talk about death. So she's given up, she dies, and they that brought her, all her attendants were murdered, and he that begat her, which is either her father, he that begat her, or sometimes, if you go back into the Hebrew, you can look at it in a different way. It looks like it might mean her son, he who she begot, which means her son. So her son did die, her son was murdered, her father died, the king of the north died, the king of the south, everybody died. Everything went wrong because of this breakup of this agreement. And that happened in the year 246.
Okay, so overview. Kingdom of Greece split into 4, verse 4. By verse 5, only 2 left, Seleucus and Ptolemy, north and the south. The north begins his dominion because he's taken 3 territories and now he's got great dominion, as the Bible says in verse 5. Now this dominion is continuing, but by the time we get to verse 6, it says, and in the end of years, something's about to end. Something with a time period is about to end. What is that?
Life.
Life for who?
Him.
Who's in dominion? Who was brought to our attention as the one above all?
The prince.
The prince who is the king of the north. So it's giving a hint that the years of the king of the north are about to end. And one of the events that marks that is this marriage described in verse 6 between Berenice, who is the king of the south's daughter, and the king of the north. So now we move to verse 7, and verse 7 and 8 are together. They're just describing one event, and we're going to come to see that verse 9 is a summary of 7 and 8. So 7 to 9 is just one event, and this is our last event in historical description of Greece for this presentation. So verse 7, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate. Okay, it can sound a bit confusing at first, but let's go here and there and see if we can figure out who is this branch, what is this branch. Anyone think of another verse where a branch comes forth out of roots? I want you to think.
Little horn. Was it one of the horns?
No. The exact wording where a branch comes out of roots. That's what it says for this power. So we don't want to make anything up.
So Jesus.
Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1. I just heard a few comments. It says, and there shall come forth a rod
Root out of the stem of his branch.
out of the stem of Jesse. And then what does it say after that? And a branch, you're just repeating the same thing, out of his roots. Who's the his? Jesse. So the roots were of Jesse. So who is prophesied about here that would be a branch that would come from the roots of Jesse? Who was it? Christ. And the roots of Jesse was, what was another way of saying it in simple language?
The bloodline.
The bloodline, the lineage, the ancestry of Jesse or David. So all it's saying is, when we come into Daniel 11 verse 7, it's trying to tell us an ancestry. The person who would come, what their ancestry, what their roots, or what the people, their family line was. That's all it's trying to say. Very simple. So here it says his roots, but in verse 7, what does it say? Her roots. Who was the her brought to view in the previous verse? Berenice. So it's saying this person who will come in verse 7 was from the ancestral bloodline of Berenice. A branch, one person. Again, he was a male, just like in Isaiah 11:1. Again, he was a significant leader, just as Christ was a significant leader, obviously in a different way. And his name was Ptolemy Euergetes. And he was the brother of Berenice. So he had the same roots, he had the same mum, same dad. And he was in the south region, and he heard that his sister was in trouble because of this marriage gone wrong. Marriage gone wrong. He heard of this marriage gone wrong and that his sister was in danger of death. He gets the news and he starts speeding up from the south towards the north to try and rescue her. But before he gets there, what happened to her?
She died.
She died. She was killed. She was murdered. And how do you think his brother feels? The brother feels
Angry.
angry. And what do you think he's going to do with his anger?
Can kill the woman.
He's going to get some revenge. And who's he going to get revenge on?
The woman who murdered.
The woman's from the line of the king of the north. Who do you think he's going to get revenge on? The king of the north. So that's why it says, but out of a branch of her shall one stand up, that's Ptolemy, the brother of Berenice, and shall come forth, which shall come with an army. So when he's coming up from the south, up to the north, he's coming with his army, and where does he say he's going? Into the fortress. That means the most strongest defended capital of the northern kingdom. And he went into the fortress of this northern kingdom. What do you think he was going to do with his army?
Kill.
Fight, kill, destroy. So he comes, and this is in the same year, 246, that his sister's murdered. He comes with his army, and there doesn't seem to be any resistance. He just walks right into the capital, right into the fortress, and he takes the king of the north. What did he give to? So for the first time, before we saw the prince was above the king of the south, but now the king of the south is just switched. The king of the south prevails and the king of the north is gone down. So in 246, the king of the north receives a deadly wound. And who brings this deadly wound?
King of the South.
Yes, king of the south. I don't have to draw this. Brings down the king of the north. I don't know how to. I've just said it verbally because I don't want to put too many things on there. But the king of the south brings down the king of the north. And you might think, oh, okay, so what? But the verse in verse 5 was trying to set the stage to say he's going to have a great dominion. So when he comes down, it's a big event. It is a turning point. It is a big event. And 246 is when the north power, for the first time in Daniel 11, is brought down by the king of the south. He goes in, he takes him captive, and that's when we come to the north in that context.
So are there any other parallels? Oh, sorry. So you want to go to verse 8?
Yeah.
So verse 8, we'll go to verse 8 then. Verse 8, and shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. This is quite self-explanatory, this verse. So the king of the south, who's called Ptolemy, I'll point to it here, Ptolemy Euergetes, he was the brother of Berenice. He's going to carry out their gods, their images. He took whole abundance of treasures. He just plundered the northern kingdom. And this is the point when they're going down now. So they had dominion before, they were stronger above the south, but now the south is plundering them, and they plundered everything. They took money, they took gods, they took people, so their gods, their princes, and then it says he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the north had reigned for a particular amount of time. How many years would you get if you took 246 away from 281? How many years was the king of the north's dominion?
So king of the north begins here, 281, and he ends here, 246.
35.
35 years. So that was for 35 years, and it says that the king of the south now would continue more years than the king of the north. So you're expecting the king of the south to now have his dominion for a longer period of time than 35 years. Just a quick point to make. When the king of the south came into the king of the north region and delivered that deadly wound in 246, somebody said, oh, didn't he go against Laodice, which was the woman who killed Berenice? Like, wouldn't he go against the woman? But he was going against a woman because when he went against the king of the north, it was the woman's son. So it was a newly appointed king of the north. It's like a young guy. And that's who he went against. We didn't kill him. He just sent him off into exile. He plundered the whole of the northern kingdom. Verse 9.
So here we have verse 5. King of the north has dominion. Summary. verse 6, there's a peace agreement, 252, as the North's dominion starting to come to an end. Here in 246, the dominion of the King of the North ends, and the King of the South carries loads of treasures back to his own land. Now verse 9, or Egypt, which is where he's from. Ptolemy is from Egypt. Yeah? So verse 9 is simply a summary. So it says, so the King of the South. What does it mean, so the King of the South? What does this word so mean? What's it implying?
An event, is it?
No. Very simple. John 3:16. For God so loved the world. But how did he show it? How did he love the world? It goes on to explain how. So it's almost like a summary. For God so loved that he did this, this, and this, and this. So the summary is God's love. That's the point John is trying to make. But how he showed his love is him giving his son. And when we come to verse 9,
Like it implies.
say again?
It implies.
Yeah.
Like verse 9 is the implication of verse 8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
John
therefore,
3:16 is more like a
an
measure.
adverb as
Like
well.
a
Some
measure.
people use it as a measure. Yeah. So in a very simple English way as well, as my brother just mentioned, so means like in like manner, like almost like in this way. So it's almost like a summary. So the King of the South shall come into his kingdom. Now do you remember what verse the King of the South came? Because it says, so the King of the South shall come into his kingdom. When did the King of the South come? Which verse? Verse 7. He says he shall come with an army. So when he came, what did he do? Fight, right? So when it's saying in verse 9, so the King of the South shall come into his kingdom, did he attack himself?
No.
So whose kingdom was he coming into?
King
Who's
of
the
the
his?
North.
Sorry?
King of the
King of
North.
the North. That's the first half, which is verse 7. So the first part of verse 9 is just a summary of what happened when he came into the King of the North's area. But then it says, and shall return into his own land. What did verse 8 say he did? The King of the South, after he finished attacking?
Shall continue.
Took lots of goods and went back home to Egypt. So it's just a summary of verse 9 of verse 7 and 8. That's very simple, right? Everyone able to follow? That's the very simple storyline. I might even put here 7 to 9 because it's just all one event, right? Everyone follow? So now we've went through historically, that's just plain, undebatable facts of history on the line of Greece from verse 5 to verse 9. That's only 4 or 5 verses. Yeah? Everyone's fine with that? Everyone's followed? Okay, now we understand upon the principle that history repeats, Ecclesiastes 1 and Ecclesiastes 3, we want to see if there's any similarities of such thing happening future to this time. So, remember the presentations we heard about the King of the North? Who else was considered King of the North when we come to the end? Because remember, God declares the end from the beginning. Isaiah 46, verse 9 and 10. Says that's his character. He declares the end from the beginning. So, at the end of Daniel chapter 11, who was the King of the North?
Papacy.
The papacy. And did the papacy have years of dominion?
Yes.
By the way, if you're not sure that the Bible is really trying to bring this out, you go to the last part of verse 8 where it says, and the King of the South shall continue more years than the King of the North. So it wanted you to know how many years the King of the North was continuing for, because it compares the King of the South and says he would go on for even longer. So you wouldn't know if he went on for longer if you didn't know how many years the King of the North lasted for. So we saw that the King of the North was the papacy. Now did the papacy, according to the Bible, take 3 territories before it came into dominion, full dominion? Yeah, Daniel chapter 7. It took 3 territories. Anyone remember who they are?
Ostrogoths, Herodians, Vandals,
Yeah. Heard a nice whisper then in the background. That was correct. Took the 3 territories. Daniel chapter 7 verse 8. And then the king of the north was in dominion. So I'm going to put years dominion of, I'm just going to summarize it as KN. Is that okay? Years of dominion of the king of the north. How long were these years for? According to Daniel and Revelation, we read a few different places how long this reign of the papacy was for. Do you remember?
1,200.
Yeah, 1,260 years. And how else did it describe it? Time. Times, which is 2 and a half. So 3.5 years. Which, if you add day for a year, comes to 1,260 days, which equals 1,260 years. But the Bible also describes it as 3.5 years. Time, times, and a half. That is 3.5. Does that seem similar? Anything to do with, is it just somehow happen to be, let's move on, let's keep going. When we get to here,
Shall I put it on the board?
yeah. So you can see this, I'll just put Revelation 12:14, that's an example where it uses time, times and a half. It also uses it in Daniel chapter 12.
So was there a peace agreement before the deadly wound?
Yeah.
In the time of the papacy's reign?
Yeah.
It was a very well documented peace agreement in 1797. 1 year, just 1 year before 1798. And who do you think the peace agreement would have been between, if this is prefiguring the papacy? Who would the peace agreement have been between?
The papacy in France.
Papacy and France. It was between papacy and revolutionary France. That's how it's documented. It was called the Treaty of Tolentino. And they were making a treaty because there was war between them already developing. Before the papacy is brought down, there is a development that leads to him being brought down. So there was a bit of a development, there was a revolution that had taken place in France, and there was a treaty made between revolutionary France and the papacy, 1797. Do you think it involved someone breaking this peace agreement, and that's what brought on the deadly wound? Do you think? Yes, it did. It even involved a marriage. So what happened was, I'll tell you a brief history of the story, then you can go away and research it. Napoleon was supposed to marry someone called Desiree, but he decided, no, I'm not going to marry her anymore. He felt bad for her. So he arranged, again an arranged marriage, for political kind of reasons. He arranged a marriage for this Desiree lady, the deal that he made. And the same thing happens in the time of the papacy. Because Dufault is shot and killed, that's when Napoleon sends his general Berthier to go and deliver a deadly wound. So how does he deliver this deadly wound? Is there any similarity?
Okay, so as we've just seen, there is similarities. King of the South and the King of the North make an agreement here. King of the South and King of the North make an agreement here. There's a marriage here. There's a marriage here. It goes wrong here. It goes wrong here. Was there any similarities now at this point of history in 246 BC and 1798? So, very simple. What does the verse say? The verse says in verse 7, which shall come with an army. So you have an army from the south marching in to the territory of the King of the North. Did you have an army from the south, led by General Berthier, marching into the territory of the papacy in 1798 with an army? Yes, she did. Ellen White talks about in The Great Controversy that General Berthier marched in with the army to where the papacy's throne was, which was where? Here it says he goes to the fortress. Where's the fortress in 1798? Vatican. And where did Berthier go to take the Pope captive? The Vatican. So he also goes to the fortress to deal against the King of the North. Now, he takes him captive in 1798, right? Takes the Pope captive. What happened to the King of the North? He was actually called, he was on the board here, put his name here, called Seleucus Callinicus. That's his name. Obviously here, 1798, is Pope Pius VI. Alright. The Pope was taken captive, that's what Ellen White says, Great Controversy. What happened to the King of the North here? Do you think he was slain and killed? He
No.
was taken captive. You go back and read the history, he was taken captive. How did the King of the North, which was the papacy in 1798, how did the King of the North, or the papacy, die? Where did he die?
In prison.
What did Ellen White say in The Great Controversy? He died in exile. Believe it or not, how do you think Seleucus Callinicus died?
In exile.
You can just type in his name, Callinicus, type it into CD-ROM, and all the pioneers, type it to Google, all the historians will confirm that Seleucus Callinicus died in exile from a fall. So here we see the fall of the papacy, here we see the fall of Seleucus Callinicus, but by being taken captive and by being died in exile, just like as happened to the papacy. So here we see all these parallels, and there's even more. When the King of the South, which was France, when they left Rome and the Vatican, what did they take anything with them?
Yeah.
All their stuff. I like that. That's very northern or English way, I should say. All their stuff was taken. Quite literally in history, you go back and they took paintings and this and treasures and gold and silver, and they took all and carried it where? To France. Isn't it the Louvre? Something like that. And that's where they kept a lot of these infamous treasury for a long time. And in the verse A, what does it say the King of the South took with him in that history?
God.
All the treasures, silver and of gold, and he carried it back to his homeland as well. Is that another similarity? And it's interesting because when we see in this principle of history repeating, this is not some, when it repeats, if you notice, it's repeating physically. He physically carried away the treasure, the silver and the gold, King of the South here, and here, the King of the South physically carried away the silver and the gold. He physically was taken into captive here. He was physically taken into captive. He physically died in exile. He physically died in exile. These are not, it's not some spiritualistic somehow application. This was repeat of events. I just want to bring that home. You can see that all along here. And so by 1798, in the same way, King of the North receives his deadly wound. And the 3.5 years, if you allow me just to, it's almost a direct, how does it, is it this year? You can't change the date, this is the historic date. Almost every, both atheistic and Christian and pioneer and anyone in the world, when you just type in and confirm, all say these dates. All of them, unanimously. And all with this. So how did it just happen that these years are directly parallel
Just those
to
dates.
these years?
beginning and the end. Just those two dates coincide all at one.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord for that.
So we see that history repeats itself. And here we're just at the beginning. We've just went through 4 or 5 verses on Greece. We've not even got through. There's what, 10 more, 15 more verses to take place. And if it's chronological like this, which so far it is, these are not dates that are as such applicable, the actual physical date now, but the date just points us to important events. 1798 is done and past and history, but the event was about the papacy, who we know is going to resurrect. So we're looking at these line of events to see the signs of the times, or what's going to happen, not a date, not a prediction of a date, because time is no longer, but by the sequence of events. Have you ever been driving down the motorway? It's probably more applicable to English people. And as you want to know where to come off, or as you're preparing to come off, how do you know when to come off? Do you take a stopwatch and you time it and you say, okay, in 64 seconds, it's going to be the exit? What do you see?
Sat nav says 800 metres.
Okay, hear a voice. That's definitely one. But what do you physically see on the motorway? You see signs. What signs? 3, 2,
and
1, exit. So you don't know how long it is between sign 3 and sign 2. You don't say it's 64 seconds or 10 seconds or 3 seconds. You don't know the time. We don't have the time. We don't have that knowledge today. But you see 3, you know there's a 2 coming. You see 2, you know there's a 1 coming. And when you see 1, you know it's exit. And what we're doing is a very similar thing. We're looking at sequence of events, and we're going to see that's going to lead us into where we are at the time of the end. So in summary, here we see that the time of the end, which we saw is 1798, or found in Daniel 11. Very neat. Daniel 11 verse 40a, when the king of the south pushes at him, is also described in verses 7 to 9. So we see a repeat of history in the verses at the beginning and at the ending of Daniel chapter 11.
So, quick question.
Fire.
In verse 2 of Daniel 11, when it says, "Now will I show thee the truth," who's speaking?
And now will I show thee the truth. Well, if I remember correctly, Daniel chapter 10, we see Gabriel come into the picture, being sent to speak unto Daniel. And in fact, even earlier than that, in chapter 9, Christ says to Daniel, to Gabriel, to tell to Daniel, make this man understand the vision. So if I'm understanding correctly, it's Gabriel. And Gabriel is sent by who?
Jesus.
Remember that verse in Luke chapter 1 verse 19? And Gabriel's introducing himself and he says, "It's I who stand in the presence of God. I am sent to speak unto thee." So the message he brought, was it of himself, Gabriel?
No.
No.
Who sent him?
Jesus.
So to reject the message of truth sent by Gabriel, which is the history of Daniel 11 so far, because he's the one who's speaking, is to reject who?
Christ.
Is to reject Christ. And it's interesting because when you go to, was it verse 7 we were in, and we saw there was 2 branches. It says one was the branch which was Christ, and one was the branch which was the king of the south. Now someone might tell you today, oh, you just need the branch of Christ. You don't need to understand the branch of the king of the south, because that's what he called him. There was 2 branches, 2 different characters, 2 different people. One was the branch of Satan, and one was the branch of God. And someone might say to you, oh, you don't need to understand the second branch, the branch of Satan. You know, don't just look at the branch of Christ. But we're told, I think it's 7 Bible commentaries, page 949, it says, those who fail to understand the meaning of Antichrist will take their stand on the side of the Antichrist, meaning we need to understand it, otherwise we'll just take a stand with the king of the south, and we don't want to do that, do we? But on the other hand, the branch which is Christ, sometimes we get so bogged down on the branch of Satan, we forget to look at the branch of Christ. And I think it's Zechariah 6 verse 12, which is a prophecy. And it says, behold, there shall be a man like a branch. Behold the man which is the branch. These are the words of Zechariah. Who is that talking about?
Jesus.
Jesus. Behold Jesus. Behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. Christ is right there as a branch. Just as much as important to understand the branch of the King of the South, it's just as important to understand the branch of Christ. And you cannot separate and say, I need one but I don't need the other, or vice versa.
So, second question then. Has this truth got anything to do with salvation?
Yes.
Amen.
Someone says yes. Sanctify them through thy
True.
truth. Thy word is
True.
truth. What's sanctify mean?
Make
Cleanse.
holy.
Cleanse, to clean, to make something holy. What are you cleaning? What is God cleaning us from?
Sin.
Sin.
Sin and our selfish, wicked hearts. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. What did Gabriel say he was going to show in Daniel 11?
Shows the truth.
Truth. And is it the word of God?
Yes.
Then it's the word of truth.
Amen.
So God says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. We're going around trying to be holy by doing all these different reforms, eating vegetarian food and doing these different things. And God says, no, I want to sanctify you through my truth. My word is truth. So that means every part of truth that God wants to use to make us clean. Is it just Daniel 11? No. But Daniel 11 is included in it. Because he says, now will I show thee the truth. And what book of the Bible did God put a blessing on? Revelation. Why? Why? What's the greatest blessing God could give you apart from righteousness through Christ and his Son? That's the blessing. Blessed are they that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy and keep the things that are written. So the second part is keeping it. So it's not just knowing this truth that will sanctify you. How could simply knowing some Daniel 11 what it means, how can that sanctify you? It's not about a head knowledge. That's not what sanctifies us. Even though God will use it to sanctify you, that's not what sanctifies you. I want to read a quote from Desire of Ages, page 309, paragraph 3. And it says, men may profess faith in the truth, it's all of us, but if it does not make them sincere, kind, patient, forbearing, heavenly minded, it is a curse to its possessors and to the world. So it says men may profess faith in the truth, but if it does not make them, if it doesn't sanctify them, it is a curse to them. So just knowing some truth, any present truth, the fact you know it isn't that not what sanctifies you? God sanctifies you, but he sanctifies you through it. So you can't let go of it either. Say, I don't need it, I just want Christ. Because Christ says, oh, if you need me, then keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. And he said, blessed is he that readeth. So he wants us to understand this, but he also doesn't want us to lose sight of the fact that he is the one that makes a change in the heart, and that is what sanctification is. That's what salvation is. So it's connected with salvation. Can you see that?
And isn't there a quote about neglecting a part of the truth?
There is a quote about neglecting. It's from First Selected Messages, thank you, 317, paragraph 2. And it says, sanctification, talking about sanctification, says this work of sanctification cannot go on in the heart while the light on any part of the truth is rejected or neglected.
So you're saying
This
to me,
work, cannot go on in the heart, sanctification, while the light on any part of the truth is rejected or neglected. So you might just neglect light. Think about the time when Gabriel came at the birth of Christ. You have the shepherds and you have the Pharisees and leaders and church leaders. Which one of the two groups were rejecting light? The light of Gabriel, the truth that Gabriel came. At that time, Gabriel said, "Now have I come to show you the truth," to the shepherds, didn't he? And what did he say then? He said, "This is what Jesus is doing." And which group rejected or neglected that light from the image of Gabriel? It was the leaders. And which group accepted the light? It was the shepherds. You know, they were studying the prophecies on that hill. Isaiah Pages says it. They were studying prophecies when God sent the light from the angel Gabriel. And did it affect those leaders' salvation by rejecting the light? Yeah, it did. So we were told that if we reject or neglect any part of the light, so it means the things that God has revealed, the light. If anything God has revealed, if we neglect or reject it, then we cannot go on in the work of sanctification.
So, in summary, as a final point, we see that the history of Daniel chapter 11 in the kingdom of Greece, and we've only touched 4 or 5 verses, from verse 5 mainly to verse 9, directly repeats the history of the king of the north again, yet future, which was then the papacy, and it so far is a chronological description in its order of events, and we've only reached verse 9. So on the testimony of 1, 2, 3, that must mean the descriptions of further events must continue this line of history, past, possibly present, and certainly yet future, because we're not yet right at the end of Daniel 12:1. So we're going to continue in our next presentation from verse 10, continue where we left off, and see what line of events God has in store to show us that we can learn, so that we can know where we are. And it says that the children of Issachar had understanding of the times, that they may know what they ought to do. Brethren, do you want to know what God is asking you to do?
Yes.
Is it your desire then to receive Christ through the agency of His prophetic truth? That's your desire. If you desire to continue with us in Daniel chapter 11, let's pray and let's give ourselves to the Lord. Dear Father, we thank you for your promise that now, right now, you will show us the truth. Let this truth cleanse us, sanctify us, wash us, and prepare us for the soon coming events which are soon to take the world by surprise. Guide us and keep us, we pray and plead, and help us to meditate upon your words day and night. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.